Hello, good afternoon, happy Friday, and welcome back to Kids Corner, Book Talks for Kids with Ukiah Branch Library. My name is Sam. I'm the children's librarian here at the Ukiah Branch Library, and I believe this is episode 14. So today I'm going to go through 4 new books here in the children's room. I have 2 nonfiction chapter books, 1 fiction chapter book, and 1 amazing picture book to talk about with you today. So they will be The Survival Guide for Kids with Autism Spectrum Disorder and Their Parents by Elizabeth Verdick and Elizabeth Reeve, MD. And then we will talk about Sisters of the Neversea by Cynthia Leitich Smith. And then we will talk about What is the Plague. This one is one of the very many what is or who is books, generally nonfiction and biography books. This particular one is written by Roberta Edwards. And then we will do Pangolina, a picture book written by Jane Goodall. So let's go ahead and get started. They will be in that order. So first off, we're going to talk about The Survival Guide for Kids with Autism Spectrum Disorder and Their Parents, written by Elizabeth Verdick and Elizabeth Reeve, MD. This is the updated and revised edition. Their last edition was in 2012, back when people still got diagnosed with Asperger's. We don't diagnose kids with Asperger's anymore, so this is the new edition. So, have you been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder? Or do you know anyone, a friend, a family member, maybe a parent, who has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder? If you answered yes to either one of those questions, this is the book for you. It will cover everything from what is autism spectrum disorder, what are some of the symptoms, what makes people who have autism spectrum disorder different. It will cover things like that, all the way over to who are some famous people that have had autism spectrum disorder, or how to build skills that are necessary for you to thrive and have fun in school, with your friends, with your family, and just with life in general. It will even cover things like helping you how to learn to deal with really, really, really big feelings when you feel like you need to lash out and really, really, really get upset because you're feeling something so huge inside your body and you just can't hold it in. This book's going to help you learn how to deal with that and how to help yourself relax when you feel overwhelmed. And most importantly, in my opinion, it's going to help you understand how to love and appreciate yourself just the way you are. So this is a 242 page, it's big, nonfiction chapter book that is just chock full of all kinds of information about autism spectrum disorder, both for people who have autism spectrum disorder or for people who know and love those who are on the spectrum. So it includes a full bibliography and index of information, as well as a full 4 pages of resources for further reading if you're interested in reading more. So it's definitely best to read this book with an adult because there's a whole lot of text, and some of those words are up to 4 syllables, so there's quite a lot of information in here. I'm not saying that kids can't and shouldn't read it on their own. They absolutely can, but I would highly, highly recommend, as would both of the doctors, one of whom again is an MD, would recommend reading it with the knowledge that an adult who is loving and caring and supportive of your diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder is nearby so that they can provide support if you read something that triggers you or sets you off, or if you read something that's confusing and you need context. It's really important for kids who are on the spectrum to read this book with knowledge that they have a supportive caregiver nearby who can help them understand what's going on. That being said, I would really recommend that it's read by kids maybe 9 or 10 and up, because like I said, there are quite a few words that are up to 4 syllables. It's got a lot of text in here, Each page is just full of text. There are super cool illustrations and lots of fun little infographics to help make information a little bit more exciting, but it is definitely a rather intense book. So this is the survival guide for kids with autism spectrum disorder and their parents. Again, it's written by Elizabeth Verdick and Elizabeth Reeve, MD, and I think this would be an awesome book for all parents, caregivers, teachers, daycare providers, or anybody who works with children, including myself, and then for any kiddos who have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or maybe think that maybe they should be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, because it's really going to help them figure out how to manage their life in the way that works best for them. And that being said, I do also think it would be great for adults with autism spectrum disorder. You probably don't know this, but I am on the spectrum, and this book is one that I have read, and it just came out. So I'm a full-grown adult, and I read it. So I think this is an awesome one if you should feel that you need to read it. Or even if you don't, you probably should. All right, next up, we are going to read about Sisters of the Neversea by Cynthia Leitich Smith. So Lily and Wendy, here's Lily, here's Wendy, have been best friends ever since their parents married one another. But now their parents are planning for each side of the family to spend summer apart. So English-born Lily, right here, is going to be going to New York City with her dad, whereas Wendy, right here, who is actually Muskogee Creek, is going to be staying with her mom in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, the girls aren't going to say it, but they're both super worried that this is going to be such a big change and what that change is going to mean for their family. They're going to be apart, especially what it's going to mean for their little half-brother Michael. So, what they should be thinking about, instead of this worry though, is the little boy who has been sitting outside their window and watching them from a tree. I think maybe they should be worried about him, because little do they know, he intends to take them from their home with their parents for good. He wants to take them to stay on an island with animals and fairies and other kidnapped children. And they're going to be surrounded by an ocean with mermaids and pirates and a giant crocodile. Does that sound familiar? It should, because the boy that's watching them is Peter Pan. So this is a modern take, a reimagining, if you will, of the classic Peter Pan children's novel by Jan Berry, and I cannot recommend this book enough. It is 297 pages of fairly dense text, no illustrations, and it is including a very, very short epilogue, and it is a beautiful and, most importantly, diverse representation and interpretation of Peter Pan, and it features two intelligent, creative, loving, protective, and imaginative young women who will do anything to protect each other and their beloved little brother Michael, and I cannot recommend it enough. I cried, and I laughed, and then I cried some more, and then I laughed some more because there's a lot of really funny stuff, but I cried a lot too while reading it because it's just so sweet. So I would recommend this for ages 8 and up, especially for children who are part of a blended family like me. Obviously, if you're not part of a blended family, it's awesome to read about blended families. It's great to read about things that you're not part of as well. But there are so many parts that for me felt really personal to my own experience with the stepmom and step-siblings and half-siblings. And I can think of so many instances where this book could be really great at helping children process their own changing family dynamics. So I would super recommend it for kids that are part of a blended family. But I recommend it for everybody. This was such an amazing book, and I really, really love the way Cynthia Leitich Smith reinterpreted Peter Pan. She did some things that I would never have imagined. I'm not going to give away any more than that, but it was amazing. So again, that is Sisters of the Neversea by Cynthia Leitich Smith, available for checkout. Highly recommend. Okay, here's a short one. This one is, What is the Plague? Very apt right now, wouldn't you say? So this one is a nonfiction chapter book. It's very, very small, written by Roberta and illustrated, because there are some fun little illustrations in here, black and white illustrations, illustrated by Dede Putra. So, did you know that in Western Europe, people were having such a great time between 1000 current era and 1300 current era that the population of the world actually almost doubled in that time frame. A bunch of people were born in those couple hundred years, man. So to the people who were alive between 1000 and 1300 CE, it must have seemed like the good times would never end. Life would just be great for the rest of time. But little did they know. Little did they know what was coming. What was coming, you ask? Well, what was coming was the plague. So, the disease called the plague spread throughout the world. Honestly, it was international. It was everywhere, but it was most deadly in Western Europe. Spread in the mid-1300s, and it was called by many names. It was called the pestilence, the Black Death. It was even called, what was the last word that I can't remember? The Great Mortality, that's what it was. It had all kinds of names, but one thing was completely certain: the good times that people had lived through up until then were over. So this is a 108-page, like I said, illustrated nonfiction picture book with 10 chapters, and it has a full timeline of known events, a bibliography at the end, and readers are going to learn about all kinds of things about the plague, like symptoms, some of the folk remedies that people believed would cure the plague, how exactly the disease spread. Hint, it was fleas on rats. Gross, where it began, where it ended, and so much more. One thing, be prepared for some ick factor. It doesn't show anything, but it does discuss lots of icky disease plague stuff. So that'll be fun for people who like the gross out factor. So I recommend this book for ages 9 and up because it is fairly short. There are only 10 chapters. Sorry, my legs were starting to hurt, so I sat down on the ground. But there is quite a bit of text, and some of the words are up to 3 syllables, so for that reason I would recommend it for ages 9 and up. Though, of course, if you've got an adult nearby, I think a kid can try their hand at reading something with words as many syllables big as you can get, as long as you have someone to ask for clarification if you need help. Alright, so last one, we're going to talk about Pangolina, which is a picture book by Jane Goodall, and it was illustrated by Daishu. Now, did you know, I didn't know this, that there is only one species of mammal that has scale, and that is the pangolin, right here. This adorable little pangolin in this book is named Pangolina, and she has a wonderful babyhood being cared for by her loving mother. Let's find a nice little picture of them. Here they are. Here's little baby Pangolina and her mother right here. And she's having a wonderful little childhood being cared for by her mom, but she doesn't know that she's actually in danger, increasingly in danger as she gets older. Because as she grows up, she starts to spend more time in the forest by herself. Let's find a picture of her roaming. Oh, she starts roaming around the forest by herself without her mom. And the humans believe that her scales can cure illnesses and more, and they are much more likely to find and hunt her as she wanders about the forest on her own as she gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So one day, hunters trap poor Pangolina. Let's find. They find and trap her. She's in this sack right here. Oh no! They find and trap her, and they put her in a cage with some of her animal friends, and then they take them all to the market to be sold. So what do you think is going to happen to our animal friends? You're going to have to follow along with the young girl right here who has made friends with Pangolina and understands that pangolins are friendly creatures and that other creatures aside from humans have feelings too. And you're going to have to follow along with her to find out what happens to Pangolina and her friends. So this is a 40-page picture book with absolutely stunning illustrations, and it's drawn by Daishu, like I said, and written by legendary naturalist Jane Goodall. It includes 4 full pages of information about pangolins at the end, including their physical appearances and their child rearing practices. For example, did you know that mother pangolins only have 1 baby a year? They cannot have more. And there are also another 4 full pages of information about further resources for reading if you would like to learn more about them, as well as resources for how we can help pangolins in the wild, as well as teaching ideas for further learning if you want to do a unit on pangolins if you were a teacher. I recommend Pangolina for school-aged readers in particular. I wouldn't recommend this for a preschool or a toddler story time, because while there are some pages that don't have a whole lot of text, there are also others that have a bunch. So you might lose attention if you try reading this one with the younger crowd. And even for school-aged readers, I would recommend being very, very comfortable with modifying the text as you go, because there's a good chance listeners will lose interest if you attempt to read the entire thing word for word. But I do think, especially for first grade, second grade, and up, this is a wonderful book to read on their own or as a group, for any unit on ecology, the natural world, endangered animals, what we can do to protect endangered animals, etc. So again, this is Pangolina by Jane Goodall and illustrated by Daishu. And all 4 of the books I talked about today: The Survival Guide for Kids with Autism Spectrum Disorder and Their Parents, Sisters of the Neversea, What is the Plague, and Pangolina are all books that have been published in the last 6 months, and they are all available currently in the Ukiah Branch Library Children's Room for checkout. So, for further news, there is Farmers Market story time at the Farmers Market here in Ukiah tomorrow from 10 to 11. There will be a volunteer there reading stories to kiddos who are visiting the market with their caregivers. We are continuing to do Lego Hour here in the children's room on Tuesdays, every Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m. So if you're interested, bring a kiddo on by. It generally gets pretty rowdy, but it's very fun. And then I do toddler story time here in the library every Friday morning from 10:30 to 11. There is also going to be the Children's Farmers Market coming back. The first day is June 22nd of this year, and we are requiring sign-ups in order to participate because we have very limited space this year. We are only able to have 11 vendors. So if you have a child who would be interested up to age 18 in running their own table at a children's farmers market, please give us a call here at the library and we will put you in touch with whoever can put you on the sign-up sheet. And again, that starts on June 22nd. It will be every week on Wednesday mornings from 11 to 1, and we hope to see you there. Otherwise, you have a fantastic Friday, have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next month. Bye!